in the 1900s, Liberia, the only independent West African nation, was a prosperous one. The republic was productive and Liberians were engaged in skilled practices such as cotton spinning, clay molding, and farming, while foreign companies invested heavily into rubber plantations and the mining of iron ore. The economy grew quickly. It became evident that the power generated from the fossil fuel sources could not meet the demand of the emerging economy, so the nation looked for alternative energy sources. In 1961, President William V.S. Tubman sought assistance from the United States government for 5 key projects, including the construction of a $24 million hydropower plant. The construction began in 1964 and the plant was built on the St. Paul River. Mount+Coffee was completed and inaugurated in 1967 and it was dedicated to President William V.S. Tubman. The plant later became widely known as the Mount+Coffee hydropower plant because of the coffee crops that populated the region. The plant generated an initial capacity of 30 megawatts of power output. Due to the demand for more power, the capacity of Mount+Coffee was then increased by an additional 34 megawatts, bringing the total power to 64 megawatts in 1973. Liberia had attracted many investors due to the availability of abundant electricity. Industrialization became the hallmark of the nation's advancement, creating employment opportunities for more Liberians. Infrastructure development was on the rise and the nation became a destination for tourists. It was an era of prosperity for all Liberians. And for 23 years, the Mount+Coffee hydro plants steadily supplied the electricity that kept the wheels of the nation spinning. Tragically, the glorious days of Liberia were cut short when the Civil War broke out in 1989. Properties were destroyed and many companies shut down. Basic social services, including electricity from the Mount+Coffee hydro plant, were affected. Nantano Brown, who worked as a plant operator at the Mount+Coffee plant, was on site when the rebels took over. He recalls his experience.
I saw one of them with this to do hair all here and dirty clothes. But that man telling me, look, get out from there. Pointing the gun at me. And then say to us, put your hands on your head and move out of the plant.
Workers were forced out by the rebels, leaving the plant shut down and unattended. The spillway gates were left closed, and that caused an increase in the water level. Due to water flowing over the top of the dam for several days, the dam eroded and eventually failed. Water flooded into the powerhouse. By the time the Civil War came to an end in 2003, almost the entire electrical infrastructure in Liberia had been destroyed. With no hydroelectric power, Liberia could no longer provide electricity to its citizens, a major setback in the economy. Hospitals could not operate as they had before. The lack of consistent power forced medical professionals to work without the lights and equipment necessary to deliver adequate health care. Business owners had no choice but to raise the price of commodities, forcing consumers to pay for the high costs of the generators that ran their businesses. Street corners were dark at night, giving criminals even more opportunity to operate. As a result, many residents of Liberia stayed indoors after dark, and the empty streets affected businesses that operated after hours. Students in poorly lit areas struggled to read in such dim light. The more determined ones studied by candlelight. Some residents had the misfortune of losing their homes to fires caused by the open flames they relied on. The government needed to do something to end the suffering of its citizens. Then an internationally renowned woman stood up for the challenge. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, known as the Iron Lady, was elected president in 2005, and many Liberians looked to her as a beacon of hope.
We must meet our commitment to restore some measure of electricity to our capital city. We must put Liberians back to work again.
She brought together a consortium of donors to undertake an emergency power program. In 2007, with just 2 megawatts of diesel generators, the Liberia Electricity Corporation (LEC) was revived. For the first time since the war, they started commercial operation with 450 customers and a row of streetlights.
Liberia is call it a country with river bodies. Hydro has to be our best option. But hydro is also expensive, much beyond Liberia's own domestic financial capacity to something. So, can we get investment? That's what we need.
By 2011, Madame Sirleaf was able to garner the support of the Government of Norway, the Government of Germany through KfW, and the European Investment Bank to fund the rehabilitation of the Mount+Coffee plant. Attendance of a meeting initiated by the Government of Norway agreed upon the project terms in November of 2011. Patrick Sendolo participated in the negotiation of the financing agreements.
One of the things that happened from the very inception with respect to funding was that we had a project that I think all of the donors recognized was an important project for the country. The commercial customers can get reliable electricity to carry on with their lives, to carry on with their businesses, to carry on with their hospital businesses, to carry on with their commercial activities, whatever. That's what's missing.
The hope and the vision is that this project is for the benefit of the people of Liberia. The goal is to bring cheap and reliable energy to the people, and that is the vision. So we want to see the use of the power by the people, by the industry, by the administration, to get things done.
The Government of Norway and Her Excellency started discussing whether there were programs that we could support in Liberia. Norway is a hydropower nation. We know how to deal with hydropower. All our country was built on hydropower. And she talked about Mount+Coffee and the story of Mount+Coffee. And the Minister of Development that time, he was very keen on the project, and I was working for him. So actually we went together on a helicopter trip above the old ruins of what was left of Mount+Coffee. And he looked at me and he said, "Hege, this is going to be quite a job."
The momentum to restore the Mount+Coffee hydro plant grew, and in 2015, the Millennium Challenge Corporation also joined the project as a funder.
MCC's commitment is to identify investments that can reduce poverty, and this is an area that we can make a material contribution to the supply of reliable and low-cost energy. And Mount+Coffee has that opportunity to provide this type of energy and be a platform for future energy development in Liberia.
Liberia received approximately $340 million for the implementation of the project, with 41% of the funds coming from the United States, 20% from Norway, 19% from Germany through KfW, and 18% from the European Investment Bank. The Liberian government contributed 2%. With the funding secured, the project got underway. The Government of Liberia requested that the Government of Norway finance a Project Implementation Unit or PIU to ensure that LEC will have the necessary expertise to oversee the work. Norway was already financing a management contract at LEC with Manitoba Hydro International, so this contract was expanded to include a PIU. Norway was the sole funder of the PIU, with a contribution of approximately $15 million. Christine Strapp, a member of the PIU team, served as the Director of Operations for the project.
President Sirleaf really wanted to turn on Mount+Coffee by Christmas of 2015 so that she would give it as a present to the Liberian people. And that really gave us just over 3 years to implement the whole project.
Recognizing the long lead time for manufacturing the turbines and generators, the PIU began with two priorities in parallel: contracting an owner's engineer and contracting the generating equipment supplier. Mount+Fishner, a joint venture company, was contracted as the owner's engineer, and the planning and design for the construction works got underway. The owner's engineer is a team of experts that is responsible for the planning, design, and supervision of construction works on behalf of the project owner.
The employer, the panel experts, and the funders identified the need to redesign the power station, not based on its original design, which was a two-phase process in the 60s and 70s, but rather go for an improved performance station, which is the route we followed.
Our first task was to start to assess the condition of the plant. And we had read about the powerhouse before we got there, but I don't think it could really prepare us on what your first impression of the powerhouse really was, because it was a remnant of an old powerhouse. It was really a skeleton overgrown by reforestation. We only had like the pillars and the columns of the powerhouse itself, and all of the non-embedded parts of the generator and the turbines were just removed.
The key priority of the project was the schedule. The PIU adopted a fast-track approach and divided the construction works into separate contracts that could run in parallel and reduce potential delays. After a successful bidding process, the owner's engineer wasted no time in getting contractors to work. Voith Hydro of Germany was selected for the generating equipment contract. Voith undertook the first task, which was to open up the rusted spillway gates. They had been stuck in place for almost 2 decades since they were closed in 1990. The project team then made a contract that would construct temporary dams to keep the powerhouse dry and safe to work in. This contract was awarded to Donors International of the United Kingdom. The powerhouse had been abandoned for so long that it became a habitat for thousands of bats. Care had to be taken to safely remove them before construction could begin. The project officially broke ground in January of 2014. Meanwhile, work on procurement continued. In June 2014, LEC signed a contract with Andritz Hydro of Austria for the hydraulic steel works and auxiliary systems, which included the rehabilitation of the spillway gates and the intergates in the powerhouse. While the project was just gaining momentum, West Africa was struck by a major crisis. Ebola, a deadly virus unknown to West Africa, invaded Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea and brought everything to a halt. Over 11,000 people across the region lost their lives to Ebola. The crisis was a major setback for the economy of Liberia, and it forced the international contractors working on Mount+Coffee to evacuate overseas.
While we were overseas, we were coming up with different strategies to try and save some time while not knowing how much time we were going to lose.
Though the works at the site in Liberia had to stop, the team took significant steps to maintain momentum. Procurement for the construction of the substation at Mount+Coffee and the upgrading of the LEC Bourgeois and Pinsville substations was awarded to the National Contracting Company of Saudi Arabia in December of 2014. Following a competitive procurement, a Liberia-based joint venture of Pan-African Engineering Group, Sigma Group Incorporated, and Mamba Point Hotel (PSM) started the construction of the camp. PSM had only a few months to get the camp up and running. It was built to house up to 250 staff at peak capacity.
Look at our experts we have here. If they have to live in the Monrovia to come to work here every day, you travel on that road every day, you see the road conditions. If they have to live in Monrovia, where would they stay? They will stay in hotel. So what we did, we build accommodations here on site and accommodate. I too live here on site, and it's a wonderful place to live.
Through perseverance, the country was declared free of Ebola on May 9, 2015. It brought a big relief to the people and government of Liberia. This meant the international contractors could mobilize to Liberia to resume construction works. Unfortunately, the Ebola crisis caused the project to lose a year. It will no longer be possible to achieve the goal of first power by December 2015, but the project team committed to turning on the plant by December 2016. In May, LEC signed a contract with Eltel Networks of Sweden for the construction of 2 double-circuit high-voltage transmission lines from Mount+Coffee to Bushwa and Pinsville in Monrovia. Building 2 transmission lines ensured that the 488 megawatts of power generated by the 4 units will reach Monrovia substations and customers even if one line was out of service. That same month, LEC signed a contract with Donors International of the UK for the main civil works, which included the important task of rebuilding of the dam as well as the powerhouse, other main structures and the roads. The rainy season created challenges for the construction and access. The 2 roads leading to the hydro plant were in a deplorable state. The main access route along Cardwell Road was impassable during the rainy season, which meant that people and equipment had to travel twice the distance on an alternative route. Bill Hicken, project director for the PIU, had to find solutions to the problem.
It was going to be necessary to upgrade that road so that it would accept all the big loads that we had to transfer from the port of Monrovia to the site. We're talking about transformers especially, 70 tons each. They can be damaged if they receive too much shock during transport. So it was crucial that we upgraded the road.
By September 2015, all contractors were mobilized and on site. Donors began rehabilitating the section of the dam that was washed away. The race was on to reach the first major milestone. By late 2015, the project site was like an ant colony. Everyone was working to achieve a common goal, restoring Liberia's hydropower. Andrets began reinforcing the spillway gates which controlled the level of water in the reservoir. Both intake and spillway gates were sandblasted and refurbished, ridding them of corrosion and strengthening them. Voith began the task of removing the old turbines and other damaged equipment so that the turbine pits could be modified to hold the new, modern, higher capacity turbines. Meanwhile, Donors workers were rehabilitating the tunnels called the penstock and draft tubes. Through the penstock, water from the reservoir will flow from the intake gates to get the massive turbines in motion, and from there it travels through the draft tube and exits into the tail race channel. Rain or shine, day or night, the work continued. Although the project team was under immense pressure to meet the deadlines, ensuring that the contractors followed proper health and safety procedures and precautions was of paramount importance. By October 2016, Andrets had achieved operation of 7 of the 10 spillway gates, which controlled the level of the reservoir by releasing excess water back into the river. Coffee dams that stopped the flow of water had to be removed in preparation for the filling of the reservoir with water, which is known as impoundment. Water from the reservoir would subsequently power the turbines in the powerhouse, and this is how the plant generates electricity. Empowerment was a very important milestone for achieving first power by December. Other important milestones included the reconstruction of the dam, which donors had completed in the middle of 2016. The substation at Mount+Coffee had to be completed, with the bay for Unit 1 ready to transmit power to Monrovia. The transmission line between Mount+Coffee and Bourgeois substation had to be completed and ready for energization. The PIU had to ensure that the people living around the reservoir would be kept safe when the waters were rising. The PIU gave residents of remote villages around the reservoir canoes, which allowed them to maintain access to their sources of income and cross areas filled with water. The project also constructed 3 steel bridges, over a dozen culverts, road upgrades, and 2 floating walkways around the reservoir, so that the rising water would cause little to no disruption to the lives of people in the project-affected areas. People living within the corridors of the transmission lines also had to be compensated and informed about the safety considerations of living under the lines. Over 1,200 people living in the project area and within the corridors of the transmission lines had to be contacted and compensated over the life of the project.
In general, people move close to a river because there you have the most or the best soil due to flooding, so nutrients come in, and that's where they do their farms. Now we come with a reservoir, they have to leave out. So what we did is we measured all the farms and we counted the trees so that we could compensate them fairly.
The PIU did not stop with compensation. After the project-affected people received their money and replacement land, they received training on how to safeguard and invest the funds. On site, the project steadily moved forward. By October 2016, Voith engineers had fully assembled and installed the turbine identified as Unit 1 in the powerhouse. After several tests, the Voith engineers were confident that they were ready to do the wet commissioning. Stop logs had to be removed from the intergates and the tail-raise gates for the free flow of water. By mid-November, for the first time in over 25 years, Intergate 1 was raised and water from the reservoir made its way into the powerhouse to commence the wet testing of Turbine 1. Everyone was nervous. After hours of testing, the team was elated to find that the first turbine unit had been assembled so precisely that the overspeed test caused hardly any vibration in the powerhouse.
There was really some kind of jubilation in the assembly. Just people say, we did it.
On December 15, 2016, Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf hosted an array of government officials and international partners as guests of an elaborate program commemorating the delivery of first power from the renewed Mount+Coffee plant to Monrovia.
The completion of Mount+Coffee is perhaps the finest manifestation of Liberians taking what epitomizes the totality of the destruction wrought by war and overcoming it, of turning what was a grim tombstone of our savage war into a magnificent and living cathedral of progress and development.
After more than 4 years of hard work, Mount+Coffee was set to deliver clean energy to Monrovia from its first turbine with a capacity of 22 megawatts. Residents of Monrovia were on the path to a long-awaited improvement in their quality of life. The partners that funded this initiative could see their donations at work. Despite achieving the huge success of first power, the job was not yet completed and construction continued. Voith continued to work on the installation and the testing of the remaining 3 units. Donors excavated the ground where an emergency spillway and bridge will be constructed in the last stages of the project. The height of the spillway bridge and the dam crest were raised more than 2 meters higher than they were in 1990 when the dam flooded. Tashman Structures of South Africa was hired for the construction of the emergency spillway wheel, the sole purpose of which is to provide an alternative path for water to flow in case the main spillway gates do not operate as planned. Tashman's labor-intensive construction approach allowed for the creation of hundreds of jobs for the surrounding communities. The firm also constructed a 220-meter bridge over the emergency spillway, which created a secure access route through the site for the surrounding communities.
The purpose of the emergency spillway is to ensure that under similar conditions that had occurred in the early 90s, where the 4-bay dam was washed away, all the assets and the infrastructure of the project are protected.
The residents of 3 villages downstream of the emergency spillway had to be relocated to a safe zone. For safety reasons, no one would be permitted to reside in the proximity of the emergency spillway. As a result, the project constructed a new settlement called Unification Town to signify the combination of the 3 villages.
It came about the times for us to leave from this place. They said, look, every small things you got here will be counting it to compensate you people. And we all agree. Well, with them, every step they took, each time they go one step, they will come for me here, I will go there, and I look at it, and I will carry my people too. They will go and see. So everybody was happy.
The PIU's work of safeguarding the environment and people around the project continued in 2017 when they initiated a fish monitoring program to ensure that the river was conducive for habitation and growth. The PIU was also tasked with ensuring that the water quality in the St. Paul River and the reservoir was safe for people and for marine life. The PIU tested water from the river throughout the project to address any impacts on the water quality. Ensuring the plant's sustainability was a major priority for the project stakeholders. In August 2016, LEC contracted Hydro Operation International (HOI) of Switzerland to manage the operation and maintenance of the hydro plant for a 5-year period, while training LEC staff to eventually take over this function. After the new facility was constructed, it was necessary to protect the dam, the critical power infrastructure from road accidents, theft, and vandalism. This led to the introduction of a new bridge over the tail race channel. Fencing was expanded to protect both the general public and the assets on the site. By implementing the use of cameras and closed-circuit television, the project coordinators also upgraded security measures. The Mount+Coffee+Project provides the only crossing of the St. Paul River for 25 miles downstream and 100 miles upstream. By the end of July 2018, the project construction works were completed. It was now time to officially hand over the completed hydro plant to LEC.
We've now basically got all 4 units operational, and Mount+Coffee has been supplying probably 85% of the energy this year to the grid. Basically, we're done. The project's pretty much delivered.
To see the pictures of the pre-war plant and then to see the hydropower house in 2016, it's just really hard to fathom how we were able to do all of that in 3 years.
The rehabilitation of the Mount+Coffee hydropower plant will greatly reshape the future of Liberia. Dark street corners have been transformed into lit avenues. The presence of street lights is an indicator of the changes electricity has brought to Liberia, one of which is the ability to feel safer at night.
The hydro would do a lot in making this country to develop from a state of poverty to a state of prosperity.
Many business owners who once used generators as their primary source of power can now rely on electricity from the national grid, and the cost of electricity has been reduced from 59 cents per kilowatt hour to a more affordable 35 cents.
The LDC is committed to increasing access to electricity now that we have Mount+Coffee on full swing. Just recently, over the last 2 months, we're able to connect 120 businesses. So it tells you that businesses are more comfortable now using the LDC than a private generator, which is more expensive.
The government is actively pursuing projects to further address the dry season limitations of Mount+Coffee.
Already there are feasibilities afoot to improve the operation of Mount+Coffee by supplementing that with a dam upstream, for example. Once that large storage capacity is available upstream, then we will be able to implement further hydropower projects as the demand grows to reach ultimately 4 or 5 million people.
Many people are asking me, how can you do so much work and so much money for only 100 megawatts? But I think we have to start that small in Liberia, because you can't produce too much power, too much electricity before you have the grid developed as well. Because you need to get this electricity out to people, and that takes time. And I think development of the infrastructure, development of the electricity, and the development of the society at large has to go hand in hand.
My hopes for energy sector of Liberia is that the very ambitious electrification plan of the country goes forward with the same resolve that was shown in the Mount+Coffee project, and after that one I hope development, peace and prosperity to the Liberia.
We are interested in this project because it will help bring costs down. And we know that more affordable energy will lead to greater connections for the people. It will mean hospitals have the capacity to run at night. We hope and we expect to see some savings on that. And MCC is solely focused on how do we create economic growth and how do we address poverty through that.
When we came here in the beginning, there were 24 megawatts of energy implemented and we had 4,000 customers. Meanwhile, we have over 40,000 and we have 88 megawatts of energy implemented. That's great, it's 400% growth.
A big thank you to all our partners. It couldn't have happened without them. Liberia could not have done the hydro on its own with its own resources. And so we continue to appreciate them, and we hope that that partnership will continue and Liberia will get to the place where it can become a helping hand to other countries as we have received a helping hand from our partners.
Liberia, a nation whose economy has been crippled by long years of civil crisis coupled with the devastating Ebola outbreak, now has the opportunity for a fresh start. With the hydro back online and the development of the nation on a strong path, the country must now ensure that the Mount+Coffee is properly operated and maintained, the momentum of economic growth is upheld, and the citizens of Liberia are empowered to improve their outlook and quality of life.
Today on my promise and I come to pass. Someone like yesterday, big like today. Today on my promise and I come to pass. Someone like yesterday, big like today. Today on my promise and I come to pass. ALCA, my people ALCA. ALCA, my coffee hydro is here. The thing is here to make everybody smile. The thing is here to make everybody happy. Children was telling us on the street lights. Mama was out market under the street lights. My people ALCA, ALCA, my coffee hydro is here. The thing is here to make everybody smile. The thing is here to make everybody happy. Someone like yesterday, big like today. Getting it on my promise and I come to pass. Someone like yesterday, big like today. Getting it on my promise and I come to pass. ALCA, my people ALCA. ALCA, my coffee hydro is here. The thing is here.